Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel, or just welcome if you're new here. I'm Malin, and in this video I want to share 3 pretty easy dishes that you can make in less than 20 minutes. And I'm going to start with my favorite, which is a cauliflower rice salad with Thai basil that I'm going to top with some delicious sticky tofu with lots of flavor. Then I'm going to make a soba noodle salad with lots of raw shaved vegetables and a really yummy dressing. And then I'm going to finish off with probably the easiest recipe, which is going to be red pesto chickpeas and kale on rye bread. This is probably the simplest thing you could do. It's barely a recipe, but I wanted to share it with you because it's really yummy and you could probably do it in 10 minutes if you're quick about it. But before we start cooking, I want to thank Ana Luisa for sponsoring this video. And for those of you who don't know Ana Luisa, they're a New York-based sustainable jewelry brand, and they use a lot of recycled silver and gold in their pieces. And for their finer jewelry, they use lab-grown diamonds, which is a more ethical way of sourcing diamonds. I have been working with Ana Luisa for around 2 years now, and I've always been really happy with my pieces, and all of them still look good as new, and I wear them pretty much every day. I especially love their earrings, and this time they sent me some new sort of bubble hoops. I think they're really cute, and they will be really fun for summer. And then they also sent me some little studs with a green gem. And I really like this series. They've made a few earrings with these green gems, and I've loved them all, and I use them all on a regular basis. Finally, I'm also wearing a new bracelet that they sent me with 2 interlinking circles that I think is really cute, and I've said it before, but I think that Ana Luisa does this sort of delicate jewelry really well, and I love stacking their bracelets. I'm not doing that today, but I also love stacking their necklaces, and I think a lot of their jewelry looks really good paired together. And as always, I will leave a link to Ana Luisa's website in the description if you want to check them out. And at the moment, they actually have started their Mother's Day sale early, where they have a buy one get one offer, where if you buy 2 pieces you get the second one at 40% off. So yeah, all the details will be in the description box, so go check them out. But now let's continue on with cooking, or actually start cooking altogether, and make this riced cauliflower with sticky tofu. To make the best use of the time for this recipe, that is actually the most complicated of the 3, I get started on the tofu. And to serve 4 people, I'm using a 400-gram block of extra firm tofu that I pat dry with a clean tea towel just to get rid of any excess liquid. Once the tofu is as dry as it will be, I cut it into cubes about 1/2 inch wide. To me, this is a good size for the tofu for this recipe, but of course you could cut it smaller or bigger if you like. Then I transfer the tofu cubes into a mixing bowl, and I'm going to mix them with 3 tablespoons of cornstarch, and I'm adding this little by little to the bowl, and then I toss the tofu in the cornstarch to coat them well, and this will help them crisp up when I go to fry them later. Once the tofu is all coated, I add about 2 tablespoons of avocado oil to a skillet or a non-stick frying pan over medium heat. And then I add the tofu and let it fry until it's golden on the one side. And then I keep flipping them while I multitask other things. And the first of those other things is preparing the glaze for the tofu. So I pour 1/3 cup of soy sauce into a small bowl, along with 1/4 cup of tomato puree, followed by 3 tablespoons of maple syrup and 1 tablespoon of rice vinegar. I'm also adding in 1 tablespoon of toasted sesame oil, as well as 1 tablespoon of grated fresh ginger. If you think this takes too long, you could of course use a teaspoon of dry ground ginger if you prefer. I'm also going to add 2 grated garlic cloves, or you could use a garlic mincer, and again you could use dry garlic powder if you prefer. Finally, the last ingredient going into this glaze is a teaspoon of chili flakes, and once that's in the bowl, I use a whisk just to combine everything until it's smooth. Then I set it aside to continue on with the other components, but first I check on the tofu and make sure I flip it before it burns on any side. I find chopsticks really useful for this, but of course you could use a spatula. Next I move on to the cauliflower salad, and first I'm just going to remove all the green leaves from the head of cauliflower, and to serve for I'm going to use 600 grams worth of florets, and you can keep these leaves for other recipes and then use the florets for this one. So I cut the florets away from the stem of the cauliflower, and then I'm going to use a food processor to rice them, in quotation marks. That just means I'm going to process them down into a rice-like texture. It's really good to break the florets pretty small before you add them to the food processor, and I just like to use my hands for this. Then I make sure to clean it really well, and then I add it in batches to my food processor bowl, and I use an S-blade. And adding it in batches just means that it's easier to control the texture, and you won't have any big pieces and any really small pieces, but a nice uniform mixture like this. When the cauliflower is nice and uniform, I transfer it to a large mixing bowl, and then I'm going to get started on the other ingredients. And to flavor this up, I'm using a packed half cup of Italian basil and a packed half cup of Thai basil. And this will give it lots of herbaceous flavor and make it really fresh. But before adding it to the bowl, I just want to chop it up, and I chop it to sort of a rough fine, if that makes any sense. You don't want it too small, but you definitely want it to be small enough to be well dispersed in the cauliflower. Next, I'm slicing up about 3 spring onions, and I like to chop off the ends and then slice it pretty fine on a slant. I'm going to set some aside for garnish, but put most of the chopped spring onion into the bowl with the cauliflower rice. Then I'm going to grab a lime and zest all of the zest into the bowl, and then also cut the lime open and juice it into the bowl as well. Finally, I season with some salt, and that's how easy it is to throw together this cauliflower rice salad that's full of flavor. And all I need to do to finish it is just to toss it all up to mix it well, and then set aside while I finish the tofu. Because at this point the tofu should be golden on all sides, and it's ready to have the glaze poured over it. So I just pour that into the pan while it's hot, and then I coat all the tofu in the glaze. Then you'll want to cook it for another couple of minutes just to cook the glaze down so that it becomes less liquidy and adheres really well to the tofu. This is what it should look like when the tofu is done and you're ready to serve up. Personally, I like to serve it up family style, just topping off that rice salad with the sticky tofu and then some garnishes. The first garnish will be the sliced up spring onions that we cut up earlier. I'm also going to use some more Thai basil, and I like to take the tops off of the plant and just plonk them onto the plate because it looks really beautiful. And then finally, I'm just sprinkling over some toasted sesame seeds for some crunch and visual interest. And voila, this is the first quick meal. Maybe if you're not a super seasoned cook, it will take you more like 30 minutes, but it's definitely worth it. What I really like about all the dishes I'm doing today is that they are pretty fresh, so they're great for spring. And with this first dish, that rice cauliflower just is such a nice crunchy texture that goes really well with that sticky tofu. And now we're moving on to a soba noodle salad. So it's a cold dish with lots of yummy flavor inspired by Southeast Asian flavors. And yeah, it's super simple. We're just going to shave down some vegetables, cook some noodles, and make a dressing. So let's go. For this recipe, I like to start by making the sauce. So I'm adding 1/3 cup of soy sauce or tamari into a small mixing bowl, along with 1 tablespoon of maple syrup and 1 tablespoon of toasted sesame oil. Then to balance out the sweet and the savory, I'm adding the juice of 1 lime, which will add lots of nice tang to this dressing. Finally, to give this dressing some extra oomph and interest, I'm adding in 1/4 cup of toasted sesame seeds, which just makes it that much tastier. And then I just mix it up and set it aside while I prepare the veggies. I'm going to start off by slicing up 2 spring onions, and again I cut off the ends and slice it thinly on a slant. I think it just looks more beautiful this way, but you could do it any way you like, and then I set that aside to garnish the salad with later. Then it's time to get started on the main veggies for the salad, and the first thing I'm going to prepare is some fennel. And I like to cut off these long prongs and keep them for a stock or another recipe. And then I use my mandolin to shave it down really finely. And to serve 4 people, I'm using about 1.5 cups of shaved fennel. I'm also using both some white and some purple cabbage, but you could of course use just one of them. And I'm going to slice down 1.5 cups of the white cabbage as well and add it to the bowl. And then I'm also going to slice up about 2 cups of the red cabbage and add that to the bowl. And the beauty of the mandolin is that it takes no time at all and it shaves it really finely, which is super nice in the salad. Then all that's left to do is prepare the noodles, which takes very little time. But first you need to bring a pot of water to boil. And I'm using these Soba noodles that is a mixture of wheat and buckwheat. But of course you could use a gluten-free version made just with buckwheat or any other type of noodle you like. Just cook them according to package instructions. Usually Soba noodles take anywhere between 3 and 5 minutes. When they're finished cooking, I like to drain them in a sieve and rinse them with cold water because this is a cold dish, so you don't want your noodles to be hot. But then just do your best to shake off any excess water so you don't get a watery salad. Finally, it's time to combine everything, and first I just toss the vegetables together so they're well mixed, and then it's time to add in the noodles to the cabbage and the fennel, and then drizzle over the dressing before you toss it all to combine. Tossing the vegetables and the noodles in the dressing will make sure that the noodles don't go sticky and adhere to each other, and of course it just brings everything together really nicely. Then it's ready to plate up into individual bowls and top it off with the rest of the ingredients. First up is some thawed edamame beans for some plant protein, and I'm using 1 cup between 4 servings. And then I'm also sprinkling over the sliced spring onions, and that concludes this dish. Like I said, it's super simple, it's very fresh and flavorful. I hope you will enjoy it. Now from something a bit cold and super crunchy and fresh to something a bit warming and hearty, although still pretty light and fresh, we're going to make the red pesto chickpeas and kale on rye. This doesn't need more of an introduction because it's all it is pretty much. It's very simple and very yummy, so great quick meal. What I will say though is that I will use store-bought red pesto, and make sure that it's vegan when you go to the supermarket because sometimes they will have cheese in it, but of course you could also make your own red pesto at home. So I'll link a recipe to that down below in the description box. But now let's make this final dish. The only veg prep needed for this recipe is taking the leafy part of the kale away from the stem and then setting the kale stems away for a different recipe and ripping up the leafy part into bite-sized pieces. You could use any type of kale that you like here. I'm using cavolo nero, and for 4 servings I'm using 150 grams. You could also use something like spinach or any other green that cooks nicely. Make sure to wash your greens really well and then set them aside while you prepare the chickpeas. So first I add a little bit of avocado oil to a skillet, and then I cook 2 packets of drained and rinsed chickpeas in the oil until they go a little bit golden and there's definitely no water left from the draining process. This usually takes a couple of minutes, so you could actually do this while you prepare the kale if you're smart about it. Then when the chickpeas are nicely cooked, I'm adding in the kale and mixing them through the chickpeas before I add a lid. And then I let the kale sweat under there for about 2 to 3 minutes until it's softened, and then I remove the lid. You can of course cook the kale as much as you like, but I still like it to have a little bit of a bite. And then I like to season it with some black pepper and stir that through before I add my pesto. The red pesto I'm using is actually an arrabbiata, so it's a little bit spicy, and I'm adding 4 tablespoons to serve 4 people, which adds lots of flavor, which is exactly what this dish needs. Once the pesto is nicely stirred through the chickpeas and kale, I remove it from the heat and I get my bread out. I can recommend using rye bread for this or your favorite gluten-free bread, and then spreading a little bit of vegan butter on it before you load on that kale and chickpeas. Definitely don't skimp on the topping, and if your bread is small, each serving could definitely do with 2 slices of bread. Then for some crunch, I like to sprinkle over some toasted pumpkin seeds and call it a day, but you could also add some nice microgreens on top, which always adds some nice visual interest and of course some nice flavor of whatever the microgreen is. So that concludes my offering to you of quick and easy meals that you can do in under 20 minutes, and I really hope they will come in handy when you're in a pinch for time. As always, I will link all the recipes written out in the description box, or the written out post of them in the description box. I hope that made sense. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video when we'll be in Germany. It's going to be exciting. We're heading off to Germany in just 3 days and we'll film videos for you there. So yeah, I hope you will stay tuned and I'll see you then. Take care.